Alrighty, you ready? Let's do it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is, what time is it? 3:02. Let's do roll call. Seems like everyone's present. Good for us. Do we have everyone? Yeah. Oh, Rudy got, okay. Good. Push to the other side of the table, Rudy. All right. We'll go ahead and open with public comments on non-agenda items. Are there any public comments at the moment? Okay, no public comments. We'll go to consent items, the draft minutes from our September 18th meeting. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from September. I'll go ahead and make the motion. Do I have a second? Okay, Commissioner Kirby seconds. Discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, great. Moving right along, current business, proposal received for Lower Castaways redevelopment, assuming we have a staff report. Okay, let's do it.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the ad hoc committee. We have a presentation for you this evening with an update on the RFP that was issued. If you recall from our last meeting in September, the RFP was issued in August of this year. The proposals were due in October. And just to briefly recap, the RFP, the city was seeking proposals from developers for a public-private partnership to redevelop the site at Lower Castaways. The request for proposals outlined a number of items that were to be included in the redevelopment project, including commercial use areas, storage and launch facilities for human-powered vessels like outrigger canoes, stand-up paddleboards, etc., and park uses and open space, including connection to the Upper Castaways Park. The city received one proposal from Burnham Ward Properties. The key components of their proposed project include a little over 14,000 square feet of commercial retail use and restaurant space and recreational buildings, replacement of the existing seawall that's deteriorated, and a new parallel dock to run parallel to the new seawall that would accommodate small vessels for guests to the park. And it would also include some public park uses like outdoor event space and walking trails, hand launch areas, and parking to accommodate all of those uses. This is a site plan that was included in the proposed project. You can see that the structures are oriented on the east side of the site, and the open space, event space, is there on the south side facing Pacific Coast Highway. Burnham Ward estimated a total project cost of just under $25 million and proposes to share those expenses with the city. Burnham Ward would pay approximately $7.4 million to cover the cost of the vertical construction for the commercial spaces, and the city would cover the balance of the project costs, estimated around $17.5 million. Yeah, so the city would just be paying for that portion. It would cover the park costs and the seawall repair and the new dock, all of the parking lot improvements, etc. Burnham Ward would actually do all of the work and deliver the property, but the city would cover the cost of those non-commercial spaces, all those non-commercial uses, the public portions of the project. So the project proposal included a pro forma that estimated the total annual revenues from the site at $1.2 million. Their annual operating expenses would be approximately $455,000 with an NOI of $740,000. So under a lease, they would remit percentage rent of 5% of the gross revenues to the city, which we're estimating around $60,000 per year.
And just for the committee's benefit, so this is the first proposal that was given to us by the developer. There's been zero negotiations on this. So their proposal is that they just pay us the $60,000 per year, and that's their first proposal to us.
So the city puts in 17 million, their company puts in 7, and we get 60,000 a year.
That's correct.
Were you guys
proposal.
surprised that there weren't more applicants, or?
Yeah, I was surprised we didn't get at least 2 or 3 at least. So I'm a little surprised that there wasn't a very interesting project for many.
On the rent piece, so the estimated rent to the city, is that based on rent per square foot in addition to the 5% percentage rent, or is the 5% percentage on top of the 60,000 per year?
It would just be 5% of the gross revenues of the property.
And the assumption is then 60, so
Yes.
so we have room for negotiation there.
Correct.
Great, yeah, perfect.
All right, does anyone have any questions on this RFP before we get into the alternative? Go ahead.
I was just curious, unclear, because one of the things that was laid out was a dock. So is that allowed?
No, there'll never be a dock on this site.
Okay.
That's probably a hope and a prayer, but yeah, with Fish and Wildlife, they're never going to let us put a dock. There's some harbor commissioners here, but my time on the harbor commission, there was no way they were going to let us do that. There's a launch ramp that's on the existing site that continues in this proposal.
Right.
But yeah, no
Okay.
dock.
Who would be tasked with the ongoing maintenance of the kind of public area? Would that be on them or on the city?
Probably on the city, but it could be negotiated in the lease agreement.
Okay.
So I'll run into my general thoughts on this, and actually seeing and thanks for the probable construction costs for the park itself. I think that's a great comparator. It's actually nice to see that the RFP for what it would take to build this park is not too far off. Is that pretty correct, Sean? You think what's $1 million, give or take, between friends? Okay. So, I think that's a really interesting piece, and then it kind of gives this committee the idea to, is there other ways to break this up? As we're talking about this site specifically, is this something that if we're going to build a passive park here, as the mayor has stated, might be an alternative? That I think my biggest issue with that flat alternative is that there's a zero ROI on this, and I'm certainly not looking at $60,000 a year as a generous ROI, but that's why I think I go closer to the wiggle room place that, we do need $1 per square foot on what we're going to charge for this. And then I think percentage rent is absolutely applicable as well. So, I think that number could be bumped considerably, especially, considering what we would be putting in compared to them. Then we also kind of get into, and this would come to Mr. Webb from the Public Works side, if we're going to be building out a lot of this park itself, what is the real excessive cost of stubbing in or putting some pads in its place, and then basically leasing out a pad and having a TI dollar come in from them to build it out and just bid on those pads. And so, I think we have a very specific proposal from a developer. We have some ideas from the city. My current opinion at this point is that we need something hybrided in between this, where maybe then the city looks at, hey, all right, if we're going down this path of building a $15 to $17 million park in a space there, which I do think has some great public benefit, I still would like to see the spot activated and not just be a passive park, because there's no fields, there's not families showing up to play sports, it truly becomes passive. And not that that's a negative, but activity makes sure that nothing negative happens in those park spaces when people are constantly working through it. And so, if there was a way that we could maybe find it, that maybe the hand launch is related to us, and maybe there's something that Sean wants more on his plate to run, a hand launch program out of there. But then we look at maybe 2 pads that have a leasable opportunity with a percentage rent attached to them. We can designate the square footage on something like that. Let's say like something around 3,200 square feet for something that's a little more full service, and something around 800 square feet that's a little bit more, passive service, grab and go, coffee shop, all of that. I think the activation of that area has to be important. There has to be a reason to walk down from Upper Castaways to Lower Castaways. There has to be a reason to walk PCH up to the top. And, I go to a lot of playgrounds around this town, but I have a 2.5-year-old. And, when she's 10, I'm probably not going to go to as many playgrounds. And I think I would go grab coffee with her. We might go grab a bite. And, so I'm looking for how this stays in perpetuity to be a very active spot. I think what happens when things do not become activated, they fall into a different level and require almost more city resources to deal with. So, and I'm a big fan of us not operating a bunch of things, but still finding a way that there is at least a little bit of return on these larger investments that we're going to take. So, especially looking at numbers that are not varying too much from what the RFP had as a proposal, and what the city thinks it will cost to build this.
What happened to when we originally looked at maybe an alternative? It was around less than 10 million. This is now looking like 17 or 18. What happened there?
So we do have an alternative on the agenda. If you want to talk about that, you can, Mayor, but I just suggest you take public comments on the items.
Okay.
But the next one on the agenda is this alternative plan.
Okay, so right now we're just reviewing the proposed received. Okay, former mayor. Okay, so right now we're just focused on the RFP portion.
And I just think that this is probably a pretty different proposal than what I was expecting to see, but I do like the idea of having reasons for people to be there. The Sculpture Garden's lovely. I've walked through there. There's not a lot of people there usually. Castaways is kind of similar, where there's usually 5 people on that site right now. I'd love to have, even 15 people enjoying that beautiful area. So something that kind of gets us closer to, I think, what we envisioned in previous meetings is what I'd be open to.
Can you go back to the drawing of what the RFP?
This be an active center.
Okay, so the problem I have in this world, which obviously this is very elementary and we got a long way to go to get to where I think we should be, but I guess the rendering under the proposed on the alternative would look much different, but I just don't see a lot of space. I don't see a lot of open space in this project, and that's what worries me. I see a pretty decent sized parking lot, some kind of art gallery event space, and then I see activation of retail, coffee, and a restaurant, but there's really no. I see this much more as an active passive park. I mean, this site would be used, I think, a lot in a passive manner because you've got the Back Bay Trail. This would be a great way to complement and complete under the bridge right there, with walking trails along the water. And I love the idea of connecting Upper and Lower Castaways, but I just get worried in something like this. This becomes, another destination for retail and restaurants, but not a great place to maybe sit in the grass and have a sandwich or something. But that's a lot of parking spots too. I don't know how much is needed, but
I have a couple of thoughts on the use and the activation. I think this will be activated in terms of, think of North Star Beach, if you've been there, with people hand launching, and a lot of people go there every day. That's what I think we're going to have here, is a lot of people coming and hand launching and doing the, kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding, and I think that's going to be the main activity. And there's also the 2 rowing groups that are down there now leasing, which we could also monetize that in this plan as well. So I think that's going to be the main activation. And also we've included a bike connection and a bike fix-it station, and there should be a lot of activity with people who are riding and running and jogging the Back Bay, because this will now be a huge part of that once it connects. So that's just some thoughts on the use.
yeah.
Sean, on the North Star Beach one, on the North Star Beach piece, I mean, we get a number of comments from residents around that area. The traffic concerns, kind of, especially on the weekends, especially on the holiday weekends. It fills up, kind of I don't want to say it's like a mini Glamis over there sometimes. But does that then become a concern for this, especially from the parking side, the getting over there? You know, I would say North Star is definitely kind of a free for all because it's
Yeah.
a giant lot.
This doesn't
seems-
have that kind of beach.
Okay.
I think that's why.
Yeah.
This has little strips where people can get in and out of the water. It's not.
So you think, and I guess that's where I'm drawing the juxtaposition here
yeah.
is that, you know, if they're not able to pull their cars up, pull their, you know, kayaks off, just throw them in the water wherever, do we see that same style of activation? Because it doesn't have that same kind of free-for-all atmosphere,
Right.
that people will be enjoying it in the same way. And the only reason I bring that up is, you know, I'm not going to start talking about North Star Beach right now, but there might be an activation point where we start looking at that in the future and how we kind of dial that back to be
Understood.
for the residents as well as good for the people that want to enjoy the bay. So
Right.
just some of my general concerns on that.
Okay. Any other committee members have any comments?
Hi. Well, I looked at it from a return on capital and are trying to recover the 17 million. And at 60,000 a year, we're, you know, basically we'll never catch up. I did a little math and said if it was had $10 million of revenue a year, that would push out 500,000, and to recover, that would take 34 years to return the capital without interest on the 17 million. So I was thinking, well, geez, is there a possibility that that maybe this could work better if we sold the property? And the components to the property, I think, is a good start, but the numbers don't work. So if we sold the property and asked the buyer to do some of these features, does that change the numbers? Because the way it sits, that's 17 million out the door that basically we won't see again. So that's a consideration that maybe we could analyze.
I think part of the largest issue that we've come to in the past when talking about selling off the property is that the Irvine Company still does hold slurs on this property. And the idea of the city going to sell it, one, puts us in a very interesting piece with Surplus Lands Act and a long process with that, especially with an affordable housing piece there, which I can only imagine would be very welcomed by all residents in this area. Bayshores and Kings Road would love that suggestion. But more than that, it's very hard then if we're asking the Irvine Company for something to release these slurs to then drop slurs of our own on a property that has to then be offered up. So whereas nothing is impossible in this world, I think that is almost a decades long project to try to get through all of the bureaucracy to make this a viable for sale spot with conditioning the use as well.
Well, the Irvine Company also had a restriction on a commercial use. So I think there was already a challenge to get that through. So I don't know how the city can trade with the Irvine Company to modify the current agreement. So I still think it's something to take a look at.
Yeah, well, we did trade, and that's how we got this property. I think this is the most historic site in the city. This is the birthplace. This is our Plymouth Rock of Newport Beach. We don't have a tremendous amount of open space in this community, so I think this is, in my opinion, as the most historic site. We have such a golden opportunity. I hate to see us sell this and have it become a development project in our community when there's so much. This is on the harbor, gives great access to the harbor, whether it's stand-up, paddleboards, kayaks, canoes, whatever. Simone, do you want to talk about, obviously funding something like this is a big deal. I don't think anyone's sitting up here saying we're going to go put 10, 15, 20 million dollars in this project from general fund money tomorrow. But the reality is with some of these development projects, we have all these in lieu of park fees that are in there. I think we've got $3.5 million sitting there right now that is available. And with all these different projects coming online through state mandates, it'll be a lot more.
on the sale, I think there'd be specific conditions that might include some of these components. So I don't think it's just a sell and let the builder do whatever he wants to do. I think, we may want to define a little bit more precisely what we'd like to see. The RFP was very broad, so that may be a reason that there were so few, there was only one response. If we had a tighter plan that we all bought into, it might be easier to attract a broader base of bidders.
Do you want to go through some potential funding for something like this?
Certainly. So with the housing opportunities that have been created out in the community, there's a lot of for sale project applications. And when you do a for sale, there is the Quimby Fee Act, there is park fees that are paid towards that. And so right now we have about over $3 million in the account. And then with the projected housing projects that will come online on the for sale basis, we're projecting to about maybe $32 million. But that's over several years that it'll accumulate. And so you could take that $32 million and you could allocate it towards redeveloping the lower Castaways or any other park that the city council sees fit. So there's definitely a future revenue stream to pay for this project.
Yeah, so I think, to your point, Rudy, I think when you're talking about, does this make sense financially? No. There's no way if it's $60,000 on a $17 million, no one would ever do that in the private sector. But I think when it comes to the public sector, we've got unique funds that are coming into the city that have to be utilized for parks. So I think there's an opportunity there to do something in the city, whether it's Lower Castaways or other places. So, but good comments.
I think my biggest concern is the ingress egress traffic issue, which is I think how we ended up here, because certain times of day PCH is stacked pretty heavily back there. So while I really like the idea of having more open space, just because I feel like even with this amount of parking or things that would attract that amount of visitors, you'd have a real traffic issue. So, I mean, even a coffee shop, we have so many coffee shops in Newport that you can't even park at. So I don't know that this would be any different, but I like the coffee shop idea.
Yeah, and I think with the e-bikes and everything else, love them or hate them, there's more people getting around on the west side of town without being in cars. And there's a lot of really great bike trails in this area where I think people could come outside of being in a car as well. Okay, any other comments on this before we go to public comments? Then we'll go into the alternative idea in this site. Okay. Are there any public comments on this RFP?
Mayor and committee members, is this on?
Probably
Yeah,
not.
I think so. Just talk loud.
My name is Wade Womack, a resident. Hi, my name is Wade Womack, a 30-year Newport Beach resident. Thank you for the opportunity. I have some concerns. This is currently a city park, and I don't think we've ever commercialized our city parks. So I'm a little worried about that. I think this is a perfect instance. We have other park revenues coming in from developers, specifically go to parks. Why don't we not commercialize this and keep it as available to the public as possible? I have concerns that the commercialization is going to actually crowd out the public. The buildings are all along the waterfront, crowding out that access. Kids fish down there all the time. That's their access point to go walk up the beach a little bit or fish off the bulkhead there. There's a lot of hand launching going on there. It's very busy on the weekends on a nice summer weekend. And I would just like to see this preserved as a normal city park with good access, less commercialization. I really have a problem with the concept of handing a $50 million property over to like a preferred developer, the one and only bid for a 50-year lease, where we're doing 2/3 of the tenant improvements for them. This all just looks wonky to me. And geesh, I'd really love to see something that really keeps it a city park, maximizes public access, and to the extent that the one bidder, Burnham Ward, I think there might be some perceived conflicts of interest here to the extent that he's been
Councilmember Blum's landlord or property manager. Some reports indicate that he's a business partner. So I have a lot of problems with awarding such a valuable property. And if I recall right, on the Balboa Yacht Basin Buildings Award to Burnham Ward, Mayor Stapleton, you recused yourself a couple years ago, and I don't know if that was because he was a client or what. I don't know.
It was not.
But I just want to express concerns about kind of favoritism and preferred developers in handing a $50 million property off. And I appreciate the idea of trying to have subsidies or what have you, but geesh, a public park on the waterfront, I just don't think this is the one to give away for a 50-year lease. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a history of commercialization in our parks. Marina Park is a perfect example of a situation with Lighthouse Cafe that we collect revenue on. So, but understood. No one's looking to commercialize one of our greatest treasures in the city. Yeah. Any other public comments on this?
Mayor Stapleton, as you know, my name is Jim Mosier. I think I'm one of the many to whom this does not seem like much of a deal for the city of Newport Beach. The applicant seems to be asking to design and control a park and ask us to pay for it. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If we were to build the park ourselves and wanted to have a coffee shop in it, you could ask for proposals for that, I think, and you probably would get more response. The restaurant that they're proposing looks kind of small on the diagram, but the proposal says it's 10,000 square feet. Isn't that a pretty big restaurant? I thought that the Irvine Company was proposing one kitty corner from this, which was 14,000 square feet, which would be by far the largest restaurant in Newport Beach. This just seems like a very big one that they're putting here, and it, as others had pointed out, clearly not consistent with the intent of what the property was donated to the city for, marine commercial uses, and just some incidental things going with that. Yeah, so I think the passive park would be better. Whether it should have a coffee shop or not, I don't know, but this is not a good proposal for Newport Beach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments?
Mark Frazier, 37-year resident, Mr. Mayor, council persons, and committee persons. I'm going to blend my comments between this and the proposals A and B. The best part of this proposal is the connection to Upper Castaways. The business proposals here make me think about a Newport Beach historical museum. There's room for a structure on this property, and you could create the museum that honors the history of Newport Beach. As the mayor has said, this is the birthplace of Newport Beach. You could get rid of all this commercial. You could have a museum that has a kind of a grab-and-go feature to it with a coffee shop feature to it. I'm thinking of the Muth Center up on the Back Bay, right? You could decrease the parking, and you could capture a lot of what's in proposals A and B from staff. And I think then you'd have a park. You'd be doing honor to the city and its history. And I think you'd make it much more friendly for families and for groups. The one thing I'd add, and I know I'm jumping into the A and B proposal, is that the structures, the covered structures in one of those two proposals are too small. You need a larger one. You need one that's at least large enough for 30 to 40 people so that you can have groups meet outside in this park. And I think then you're going to entice people to come down from the bluffs through the path. You're going to entice people to come and park. And you will entice people to ride their bikes and stop and enjoy this park. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
I guess my comment is more of a question. Jim Palmer, I've been accessing the bay from this intersection since it was Rural Rights Ice Cream in a trailer park, so date myself quite a bit. I guess my question is, are there studies about how active this current use is, with maybe 20% of it being a park and 80% of it being storage? As an active user of the facility there, 25, 30 cars is pretty common. On a decent weekend, it's 50 plus. On a nice weekend, 75 to 100 cars are using that for hand launching of watercraft, accessing the Castaways, or at least the beach for the Castaways, and fishing. So I just haven't seen any information about what the current use is, and then what anticipated use there could be with a passive park, or certainly with commercial activities. We're talking about ingress and egress and traffic and whatever else. I don't know where our starting point is, so where we're trying to head with this. So I'd sure like to see that if it's available. Thank you.
Yep. I don't think we've gone to that far yet. This is much more of a concept, trying to understand what could be potential available here.
Just anecdotally, 35, 40 is pretty common. 50, 75 is on a decent weekend, and it definitely approaches 100 on a nice weekend day in the summertime.
Yeah.
Current use is about 20% of the capacity of the footprint. Thanks.
It's further thought that if there's 100 cars there now in a dirt staging lot, it's pretty incredible. But it's a great place to access the harbor for sure. Next speaker.
Hello there. My name's Nigel Bress, 28-year-old citizen here in Newport Beach, and I go to the Lower Castaways. I've been going there every single Friday for the past almost 4 years, having coffee with my dad, my grandparent. And the last speaker was totally correct. There is a lot of parking there. It's mainly a storage facility, just like you said, for everyone hand launching. I think those people in that community really should be rewarded with how you want to go forward with this location, because those are the main people using it. It is a very special location for all the outrigger community, everyone doing stand-up paddleboard, things like that. And if you take away the access by putting a large restaurant on that one spot up top, it's half of the opportunity. It's going to cause a lot of foot traffic for people there on busy weekends when people are setting up and blowing up their stand-up paddleboards. I think a coffee shop, anything like that, would be a great foot draw for people trying to make their way from the upper Castaways to the lower. And it would be nice to have some sort of location there to, when you're finished during your weekend workout or whatever you're doing up there, to have some sort of beverage or eatery or some sort of location. But anything massive like this restaurant, I just really think takes away from the park aspect, which is the most important part of it. I also appreciate the comments about it being the historical location. That's something that you get a lot of comments and signage up at the Upper Castaways with the Veterans Day and all that. I think we could connect that and make it a very historic, Newport Beach-centered experience by having some signage and historical landmarks talking about the founding of the city. Finally on it, I just, very small, but there used to be public benches. You were able to sit down there, and they were removed. And I've reached out a couple times, and I just haven't gotten a clear answer as to why. And I just am wondering, why are we removing public infrastructure? It just doesn't make sense to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there public comments on this item?
Yeah, Bob Randolph, Newport Beach resident, 45 years, I think, and own a couple houses here. One of my questions, I haven't seen any visual or image of what the proposed drawing would be from the bridge. If you're coming in your car over the bridge, is there a drawing that's available of what this would look like? Because that's probably going to be one of the most significant views of Newport Beach for a lot of people coming down the highway. So that, I'm not quite sure what the visualization is. The other thing is, my wife and I, we do a lot of bike riding, and we go by this site quite often. And we've already almost had a bicycle car issue with that driveway already, and it's very low usage. So I think you can, there's a lot of riders on bikes on that sidewalk there. So I don't think I saw anything in here addressing that, but that would be a concern, or at least some issue on design or something. And I guess, was this the only income pro forma that was available? Was just a static statement? So the income statement is basically just idealized. It really isn't 30-year long-term restaurant usage?
No, it's very much an early concept.
Just early concept,
Yeah.
that's where it is, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why
Anyway,
there's not the
That was it,
drawings
I just
either.
had a couple of things I didn't know. But the safety thing on there, on that driveway is probably, I don't know, maybe a little hidden issue, but it's, I think it's going to be significant. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Other speakers? Okay, we'll bring it back here. Let's go into the the alternative.
So my name's Dave Webb, and thank you. We'll go through a little bit. We were asked to look at another option, possibly to the proposal for the private developer to go through it. We worked with our landscape architect firm, RJM, and they've come up with a couple tonight. So to start off with, we wanted to make sure we covered in there, and this was just thoughts from when we work with recreation and what we might want to do from what we heard from the committee, is make sure we have adequate parking, that we also have a passive green space area. Again, that's discussion night. We might want to look at that. We've worked with the rec, and they thought it might be good to add a playground in here, and probably more of an older, I think it was 5 to 12, if I remember right. That would be an attractive area. Add walking paths and things we could see. You see some of the things we'll see in the concepts when we get to those. We wanted to add a bike node. We've always in our bike master plan thinking this would be a good location because there is an intersection of trails here. The bike node would basically be restrooms, water fountain, maybe a fix-it station. And then obviously the outrigger storage, hand launch, and beach access, and a restroom was also brought up as a permanent fixture. So why don't we jump into the first option here? And also mention too, to start off with, working with Lauren, we actually have some lease operations on the property now. And if you look, this is no pointer, I believe, right? If you look at the top next to upper Castaways, there's kind of a grayed out area. Currently, the Irvine company has an operation in there that's working that. They run the marine operation in there. We had it in the plan because we don't think we need the space right now, and I think it generates about $4,000 a month, if I remember. It could be taken out or put in, but in the meantime, we thought, well, why don't we leave it until we know it could be a future operations center, but now you're getting revenue off it. So with this option, if you look at this, with this characteristic, we thought it'd be good to come in and change. There's really two parameters here. Change the parking lot. If we come from Dover, coming in the driveway there, you'll see there's a circular parking lot that circulates, and that parking lot then flows through to a roundabout over by the current beach access point. That was one option there, with some parking available. Number two there, it's hard to see the numbers, hopefully you can catch that at the very bottom towards PCH, is the area where the outrigger storage would be. Currently along the bay side, it'd be kind of PCH, and then they can easily access the water that way. As you move up on that, the red little structure, it would be the restroom structure, basically, right at the edge of the parking lot. And then the playground, you can see that's just north of that, would be in that area. And then as you move towards the bay, going through the lawn area there, kind of a passive area. And the lawn actually was proposed to have probably some mounding and things, and that could be discussed. It depends if you want to have different activities on the lawn. One of the things the mounding does, allows people to play frisbees, put beach blankets down, things like that, but it keeps away the pickup lacrosse games and the ball games and stuff like that. But if you wanted that kind of activity, like you see on Peninsula Park down in they pick up a lot of games down. It's a different, more layout field. So right now this park has mounding in it. And then you've got a walking path around it, and then a nice edge along the bay with, again, the obviously launch more towards the north side that's there today. The seawall still in place, and we work around that. So that's kind of this option. The staircase you see going up to Upper Castaways, we wanted to put that in there. Regulatory wise, I'm not sure we can get on that. We wanted to show you as an option, but we'd surely, if you want to do that, we would try to do it if so desire. But it may be a little struggle because of the connection there with the Coastal Commission, but we'll see what we can do there. So that's that option, and I believe that was, help me, Larry, 69 parking spaces, maybe 73, I'm sorry, 73 spaces on this one. The concern that staff had too on this one was the roundabout, and it's a good idea, but if you can think about who's going to come in here, you might have trailer parking come in here because of, and at least the outriggers. So in this case, the outriggers would pull, the trailers would pull in front of the outrigger staging area. We would probably expect them to back out because they probably couldn't make the roundabout, but you might have the occasional person come in with a trailer boat or something, and that might be a problem. So to solve that and also add some other amenities, option B was developed. Option B has a similar thing, but it's a dead-end parking area, so you have better access from, if you come in with your Ford Explorer, something with a kayak on top, you can get right to the beach that way. We would expect, and there's a little more curvature back there where, again, you'd board any kind of outrigger offloading there, and they'd back up and then get out instead of going all the way through there. This has the playground. It has the bathroom on it. And we added shelters. Again, some gentlemen said a little larger, but there are 2 picnic shelters over there for some shaded area towards the bay. Same kind of access on the top. And then both options, if you look at it, we had a comment about the bicycle conflicts. So there's a bike trail, as you know, that comes under Coast Highway, rounds back around and comes and meets the Dover sidewalk and then goes up. I'm sorry, there's a pointer? Yeah. Oh, great. I don't see it working, but you're familiar with it. It goes back on the sidewalk and then crosses the driveway, goes north. In both these options, there's an access point you can see from that trail that's coming over the main bike trail that would then bring you into the park, take you by the restroom, the bike fix-it station, by the playground, and out and around the driveway so you don't cross the main driveway. That could be done in either option, as you see. In this one, same thing. It's kind of just weaves it through. So we'd expect a lot of the traffic to go in there, fill up their water bottle, use the restroom, and then move on their way up the hill and maybe avoid that driveway. Might solve one of those issues. So those are the 2 options there. This has a little more parking. This has 75 stalls on it. And again, that's subject to whatever you think you need. If you need, I hear 100. I'm sure we could probably find some more like that. If you think there's less, it depends what kind of activity base in there. That was the 2 options. From an all-in cost, option A, a little more expensive, $16.4 million. When we say all-in, that's the construction cost, anticipated soft costs, which would be the design part of it, the environmental work permitting, and also there'd be construction admin costs too. Option B was a little less, $15.9 million at that point. Really rough numbers until we kind of nail that in. So those are the 2 options we want to bring to you, and then Larry Ryan's with our GMs here to help us with any questions if you have it.
Okay.
So we kind of alluded to this earlier. Could we lease like a section of this, like a pad to like a coffee shop or sandwich vendor or something like that in order to, and they could do the improvements, and that might take off some of the costs here, and then, you know, also result in some kind of fees back to us? It feels like there's an opportunity there.
You have that, for instance, like Crondamar Beach, we have a vendor down there. You could do something like that with a joint building. It could be a restroom and a vendor, something of that matter. It's very doable if you want to go that route.
It'd be interesting. I mean, talk about activating the space. If you were to take this bathroom or this restroom, and I think it's a great location, but if you were to convert that into some kind of small takeaway or coffee or sandwich, whatever, with the bathroom component attached to it, you can, you know, get 2 for the price of 1 maybe. And I think having a commercial, just like on the piers where we basically have an opportunity, people to come build a restaurant there at their cost. And
yeah, if you want to do that, we could surely look at that, or the architect. I know some, like for instance, Huntington Beach Park has a little cafe in the middle of the park, and it's very popular. So something like that could be well suited.
I guess that's my general thought here, is that bifurcation of this is actually, you know, kind of the plan I'm falling more towards. I'm not, you know, and I'm in agreement with a bunch of people up here. I don't think a 10,000 square foot restaurant is even feasible or advisable here. You know, when you start thinking about actual restaurant sizes, and, you know, you think about what we have around town, you know, something like Bandera is about, you know, 3,600 square feet, which to me is a, you know, when we talk about the historical element of this space, well, I mean, the most historical element, short of, you know, having things unloading on the Dover Cliffs, was, you know, Castaways was here. I mean, we literally had one of the oldest restaurants that burned down sitting in this exact space. So, you know, and for me, when I think historical, I actually, you know, maybe it's just because I'm actually in that business as well, but, you know, community hangs out around food. They find places to meet, and that sometimes you can grab a bite. You know, I think one of the great things about the crab cooker on the peninsula is people park their boats, grab some to-go food, jump back on. I mean, there's a million reasons why. And when I look at the numbers and I see what the park costs us, and that it is, you know, generally in line with the RFP, and by no means am I suggesting we run with, you know, a flawed RFP on this. I think bifurcation of this to have some accessible points, you know, coffee, beverage is always great, but it has a time limiter on it, right? That is a very morning activity. We want this activated all the time. It is truly the gateway to Newport. And so maybe emulating that historical nature from what is one of the oldest and burned down restaurants in the history of the city, you know, I certainly don't like the ROI on, you know, a $6 a square foot and basically give us the coffee shop for free type of mentality, and retail doesn't come in there. But if you could estimate something running with, something on top of a percentage of gross on that, where you would think a 3,500 square foot restaurant, could do somewhere around 6 to 7 million here. You drop 3 to 5% on top of that. Well, hell, now we're looking at somewhere between what's that, $180 to 300 grand in cost that comes back to the city. Well, that ROI now sounds pretty. And I think the other thing is we don't look at things like we do in the private sector, in the public sector. We're not going to own this for 10 years and hope for a larger return. We're going to own this in perpetuity. And so what if we looked at a 30 or 40-year model on this and what that return looks like? The number one thing that we're up here to decide is how does this fit best into the community? And that scale down is important. The connectivity is important. I do worry a little bit about a bike trail going through. I think we've already run through this exercise in McFadden Square. And the bike trail going through a walkable area is a literal nightmare there. McFadden is the Newport Pier. And, we literally tell people to get off their bikes, walk them through that. And, it's kind of a little bit of a cluster. So I love the stations, the fix-it thing. And, clearly I sound like a biker, huh? I like the comfort of a sedan. But I love the idea, and I think the greatest part of what we're looking at for all of these things that we're going to debate up here is that we've come to a point in this city where we have grown in very different ways through all the different villages. The understanding of what this needs to be is the connectivity to other parcels in this city, right? It has utilization. I've heard some of the speakers say that. I don't disagree. But it's a linchpin for connectivity from one side of this city to the other. I joke all the time that this is where I am from, this side. I don't go to the other side of Newport. That's like crossing the bridge. That's crazy. Now I actually go over there every single day because I'm bi-coastal in Newport now. I live on both sides. The reality is we're constantly trying to make Mariners Mile better. We're trying to get this connectability there. What we've done with Castaways is becoming more amazing. The families that live up in Dover and Bayshores and even the Heights now. This is a linchpin for getting the rest of Newport to come online. And, Mariners Mile is a little bit of a blight right now. I think we could all agree to that. And, and even some of the corners here. This connectivity piece will only breed the idea that it's easier to fan out and get more done in the city. And so, whereas I don't agree with the RFP, and I also don't agree with just spending $17 million on a passive park that has a zero return, and still, even though we do have some dollars there, we have a lot of costs in this city. I think there's got to be some way to bifurcate this deal, bring it around so there is a feasibility on both sides. And again, I really like that if something can be activated in the evening hours, it becomes more family-centric. If something is not activated in the evening hours, it becomes something very different. And it requires a lot more of either a police presence, a lot more public works, a lot more work to make sure that is a safe place in Newport. And, I don't want to develop something that I feel like isn't going to be a safe spot in Newport, so.
The RFP, as I recall, was suggesting or encouraging some revenue-producing components. So that could be another reason that you only received one response. So if there was another RFP that was encouraging more of the things that Noah was talking about, more community things, or a museum, or something that really makes this place special, if income is not a priority, then maybe we look at another RFP that encourages community use and other facilities that make it a special place.
Income's always a priority, really. Yeah. That's why we're a well-run city and California is failing. But
Okay. Other committee members?
Thank you, Chair. Seeing both sets of plans, I'm more in line to want some commercial component. It's a 4-acre site, having solely passive doesn't strike me as what we need in the city. We've got lots of parks. Every neighborhood has a park near it. Even in this area, you've got Bob Henry Park, you have Mariners Park. Although there is a constituency and a population that would go to this for launching, I see it as more of a destination for most Newport Beach residents and their children and their families. So I'd like to see something where it draws them in, restaurants, something like that. It also kind of reminds me of, since it is a historical place for Newport, it reminds me of Lido House and how they created the mayor's table to kind of pay homage to our history at that location as City Hall. So I can envision something like a new Castaways restaurant or a Newport Landing or something that pays respect to that historical site for us. And it's not a sunk cost, and we're not giving it away, and we're going to own it in perpetuity. So even if a restaurant, someone like Burnham pays the $7.5 million to build it, we're going to own it forever. So they'll be paying us rent, but then at the end of the day, we're going to own it. And at that point, in 35 years or 50 years, we can lease it out for even more money. So, and it ends up being a greater revenue stream long-term than it is short-term. But short-term, we don't have to come out of pocket nearly as much. And if you are able to incorporate Burnham or whoever it may be, being responsible for the ongoing maintenance, the parking lot, all that, then it takes that off of the balance sheet for the city going forward for years, because as we know how expensive it is to maintain all these things. This would just be one more new park that we have ongoing maintenance obligations for. So putting that back on someone else would help in that regard too.
Okay. What I'm hearing, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing a Marina Park light, where it's a massive public benefit when you got the docks and the marina at Marina Park, but in this situation, it's more open space than that. There's the aspect with the children, with the human-powered launch, with the launch ramp, and then also a commercial aspect like Lighthouse Cafe, where it's open morning, lunch, and evening. So I think it's a blend between both. I do love the concept of the city being responsible for building the pad and then going out for RFP on who might be a good purveyor and help construct that. But I think my opinion would be something between both.
I'm in full agreement with the mayor on that. I think bifurcating the idea, because one, if we're going to be doing the underground work and, if this is a public works piece, stubbing out pads is not going to be the issue. And then the bids, when we go for RFP on this, all of a sudden becomes, hey, we have a set pad with a set site, which then, CDD can get an entitlement fix. So we're not looking at parking variance or waivers as we walk into this. That's what the bid or what the RFP becomes. Here's a 3,500 square foot, parking is already allotted for because we went through it with CDD. We decided that works. We have it stubbed out for what we need. As we're building parking, we can drop interceptors in or whatever may be the need there. The power is adequate, and really you're offering a pad that's stubbed, and then the RFP is, hey, who wants to actually build a building here? So, I don't want to get us into the building of the pad spaces, and so I think this has to be a parallel game that we're going to do. But I would really like it would. And I agree with the mayor. This is, one of the great sites. There's a lot of awesome features that we have here. I don't think we have to necessarily tone them all back. I think there's some things we can clean up or adjust or, maybe have a little bit of a cleaner piece. But, as looking at the RFP and seeing what we didn't like, I think it's a great place for us to turn this around, decide where we would want these pads, where it will be at the best resource for the community, and then go from there. And then we turn around and offer an RFP on those individual sites. So I think the revenue stream that we looked at, we can up that ante a little bit, but also there'll be less cost out for us. And then, we're not beholden to anybody to have them build our park, which is just not going to generally be our style.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the views from what potential commercial aspect there is, I mean, this is some of the best views in the city with the harbor and with downtown with Fashion Island and Upper Castaways. if we could make it a requirement to call it the Castaways Club, that would be my favor. I'd also say that this does lack, in my personal opinion, a lot of historical components. I mean, I'm glad to see the plaque. I think one of the biggest misses in the history of our city is moving the plaque across the street. So maybe we can get anything done today, we can just rip that plaque out and move it back to Lower Castaways and put it along the water there, because it makes no sense to me being on the other corner, or it just gets lost over there. But I would think it'd be very interesting if we had a component like throughout this little grassy area along the seawall, if you could put maybe other historical components, so make more an interpretive area where people can walk through, like not necessarily a sculpture garden, but there could be more interactive ways to talk about the history of the city. Maybe the species of fish that are in the harbor, a way to connect the bay with the land and the history of the city.
So we actually did something like that at Marina Park with the playground. We could do it here, all the panels, talk about the fish that live in the water and the food cycle. We could do something with the history of the playground and really incorporate it in and make it cool. That's just something that popped into my head. But
And I also think, like when I was walking around Philadelphia last week and the history of our country, there's some rich history in the city of Newport. So having a couple plaques,
do
that would
interpretive
identify-
panels. Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that.
And then what would be the odds of working with the Irvine? We have this beautiful public dock across the way at the end of the brand new public dock we have there. There's probably spot for 20 some Duffies or whatever. It's never used or very rarely used. Is there a way to, there's a great walking trail across the bridge now, and then it loops underneath. And connects.
Yeah.
So it'd be great if people could take their Duffies over there.
Well, there's a public dock there.
No, it is, yeah.
It's public.
That's what I'm saying. It's public now, but what I'm saying is when they get off the Duffy, it'd be cool to work with the Irvine Company, put a staircase maybe right there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because you'd have to walk all the way around by Soul Restaurant and then walk
Yeah.
back up the hill. But I think when people say there's no dock, we got a great public access across the way. That's not that far. And you literally just walk up a staircase there, walk across, and then you got already a natural underground under the bridge, and it connects right there into the beautiful. And I really hope we can do a connecting upper and lower Castaways. That would be a huge opportunity there.
If there is another RFP done, perhaps we should get the idea very tight, and even with a possible site plan of all the things that we agree upon should be in the RFP, so we can be more specific to the folks that want to bid on it, and take a little bit of the imagination out of it and be specific to what we'd really like to see.
Yeah, maybe am I misunderstanding the rest of the committee, but it seems like the RFP is done. This would be an RFP for maybe a commercial, like a restaurant concept. I don't think we want to RFP the whole thing again.
Whatever we think the site plan should include, I think we should be more specific.
Oh, for
And
sure.
We tried to be broad,
Yeah.
and it didn't really.
Yeah, if we're looking for a restaurant concept, we'd have to go out to RFP and say this is just like we did with our pier project. And
So I think we should also include a conceptual rough site plan, knowing that it could be adjusted, but at least give some vision to specifically what we'd like to see.
yeah, my hope would be is we could have pretty much a finalized concept with a pad, and say here's your sketch. This is the pad you'd be building on. What do you recommend? What would you bring? Totally. So it's not that far out of the box, and they're just plugging and play. Good. Yeah.
And have the city handle the historical, ecological pieces, I think,
Oh, yeah.
is the way to, versus other people.
Well, I think the vision would be the city does everything. There's just a restaurant tour developer that wants to build a restaurant, and they pay for that, and we share the revenue. Right? Yeah.
Also the entitlement, there will be a lot of challenges. So I think that we should probably talk about what the challenges are, how much the city wants to take on from an entitlement standpoint. Is the city going to deal with the Coastal Commission and all the other agencies that produce it? If we could eliminate or provide a lot of the processing, that might encourage more people to participate in the bid, because there's a lot of challenges ahead to get the approvals for probably anything that goes on this site.
For sure. And I think Coastal would love the public access that we're really creating here for everybody.
I don't think this is a negative for Coastal, and I think the entitlement, if we're going to be going out for RFP on this pad, is the entitlement has to be fixed into the pad. I mean, that's why setting the space, creating the pad, locking that entitlement with the parking, all of that is almost, fixed figure, and now we're just going out for operators. So, which we're not offering don't come to us with ideas. Come to us with what you want to actually build there, and kind of what's the best all around for us, and what are you willing to pay.
So, question, Mayor.
Yeah.
So, what I hear from the committee members is that we like this idea, but we want to activate it, generate some revenue. We're looking for a retail pad focusing much more of a cafe restaurant use. Are we looking at one or two pads?
One.
One
Well,
pad.
I would think one.
Well, I think one for the restaurant side, somewhere around 3,500 square feet. And I think 6 to 750 square foot secondary pad that would be like the quick serve coffee. So you now have activation from morning until evening. That is my general thought. So, something maybe closer to the PCH that's a little coffee spot, similar to what we have in the library with, where kids going in. And then you have something that's more of the Castaways Club, sitting a little closer to the historic side, are my general thoughts, but I'm willing to hear.
And is that because in restaurant world, it's easier to operate kind of as two distinct kinds of things?
Yeah, running all three services is near impossible, and usually you land-base yourself one way or the other. You either become a breakfast lunch place or a lunch dinner place, and I think to go with the historical nature of what the Castaways Club was, I mean, if you guys are ever wondering what those menus look like, go down to the Balboa Island Fire Station, and they're all still there. Oysters for about 3 cents, caviar, a bunch of liver dishes, not as popular as they used to be. But yeah, and and that's a fun nighttime activation also. My thoughts on that, when you run a lunch and dinner service, and then you have your other one that's kind of a coffee, playground, park use, it also mitigates directed parking loads during varying times. So that gives us parking during morning, afternoon, and evening, which seems to be a generally better flow than trying to pack everyone in during a specific time.
I have a quick comment that's not related to like revenue generating, but I'm so glad, Mayor Stapleton, that you brought up the historical aspect, because I think that is very important. And if you're talking about these other pads and whatnot, I love, how history and kind of the nature are incorporated at Marina Park, but outside of just for the children that are on the playground, I think that there's potential for, like, as you were just saying, like, if you wonder about like the actual menu from the Castaways Club, is there some way to like incorporate like maybe a partnership with the local historical groups, where, like there's some sort of display case in this general area that would have maybe rotating exhibits or something. It's not like a full-blown center necessarily, but something that more strongly ties in, and we might have certain plaques and whatnot, but something in addition to that. So I know, not revenue, unless you want to sell souvenirs.
Or sell space. I think you're spot on. And I look at the junior lifeguard building, because there could be a concept here where we could. I mean, I don't want this to get. This is what's going to happen. Is we get carried away, and this will balloon to 20 million easily. But I think the historical component is massive. I think we all would agree on that. That there's got to be some way to connect this. So we're just the idea people. You guys wanted to make this vision happen, but I think if I were to summarize what I'm getting up here, it's obviously to activate the space, to make sure it's lively at all times, so it's not blight and hardly used. It's a great connector for the entire city. There's a lot of trails coming through here. I like your idea, Dave, where there's got to be a way to connect through bikes and everything else without turning into another McFadden Square issue, because I totally agree with that. But there's a way to activate the space, I think, when it comes to people riding on bikes and walking. The historical component, obviously the hand launch with the canoes and everything's massive. I'm the guy up here without a kid, so I guess I might be the only one who thinks this, but we have a lot of playgrounds already. I don't know if this playground's mandatory in this location. If we put a coffee shop there instead, maybe. I don't know. I won't die on that hill for sure. But right above the hill, there's a massive park in Bob Henry Park right there. You said Mariners Park. I never saw this as a kid's playground. Sure. I think in my professional opinion, I think we could remove that and it'd create more space for a coffee shop or something.
I have a 2.5-year-old, and I'm willing to get rid of that playground right away. Yeah. Yeah, I prefer parking actually in that piece, maybe a couple more spaces, but no, we make our way around every park in the city, and I've been born and raised here, and I still don't even know where some of our parks are, Sean. We have a good amount.
Okay,
We're
so
doing
if we remove that aspect, it frees up more space for parking, maybe a second retail spot for coffee, whatever. And I would just like to see the continue from the launch ramp on both sides would be really cool. I think that if there's a possibility for doing that, I still that might lend some help.
There could be another component that is an educational component that brings in all what the marine life is around Newport Beach and the ocean and what's included in, how it survives, and a little bit about all the marine life plaques and, centers that talk about the ocean and the seas and the tides and what's in Back Bay, and really more of a marine life educational exhibit could also be something that sets us apart and contributes to the community, with all that would include the connecting components that Noah's talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Coastal loves that stuff. So
Yeah, and I think to Kira's point and to your point, having something instead of specifically geared towards children that's adult, educational for adults, and has a historical component. It kind of reminds me of if you've been down on the pier in Santa Barbara, they've got those little exhibits that are not geared towards children but are educational, and I think we could put those in there in lieu of that kind of park space, but throughout the area that would be of value to people.
I think it'd be huge along the waterway, right where the seawall is, because people are walking. It gives people a reason to walk over there too, and connect to the harbor. Yes, we can pull it right out of the water. The new trash wheel, it's really good quality. All right, anything else from?
If I could just have a follow-up question, just
Yeah,
'cause it's
please.
come up in other developments. I'm hearing the activity. We'd prefer lighting in this park because, like Sunset Ridge, the community said no lighting, and we built it without it. But we would want the lit park so we can activity-wise. Okay, just want to make that up front.
Do we want to light the park?
Well, no. I mean, we've had cases where, especially when we get into environmental areas, that the community has said we don't want any lights in the park or low-level lights. But what you're talking about is keeping the activity. So we want some over like parking lights and stuff, not just bollards and low-level lighting, right?
Michelle should reach out to the 9 people that live on Kings.
I'd be very careful on how we light it. I don't think we need a lot of.
Well, I'm not talking like sports lights. I'm just talking there's sometimes been banning about or discussions about we don't want night lighting down there because it's various reasons. So we would prefer to make sure it's actively lit.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would
That makes sense.
It becomes.
I'm not putting up all lighting. I mean, it's just I went through this with Sunset Ridge and they said no lighting, and it's like.
Yeah, we're lighting them.
Would the next step be like a vision statement that has perhaps bullet points of the components that we all believe should be in this, and then from there create a site plan that ties to what the vision statement included?
I would hope we're getting the bullet points now. Is there anything that we're missing? Because my hope would be to come back to another meeting with the architect who's here today, and have a drawing, not final, but have a drawing with what we closer to what we're looking for, and then start moving forward. I'd hate to have another meeting to go through bullet points and vision. I think the idea is in concept, and
I think we hear you, and I can talk to RGM, but Larry, you kind of get the feel here. Come back with probably another concepts with this pad showing, and you can kind of see how this works in the parking, so we can make some more final decisions on that. But I think we can hear what you want.
yeah, I'm not trying to fast track anything. We've been working on this for like 30 years now, so I want to do it right, but I also want to keep the ball moving. And
would you limit the restaurant to a single level?
I mean, God, those are.
Well, it's a pad, so and we'll have entitlements, 3,500 square feet. So if the developer wants to build a 2-story, I think they're free to do that. We have height limitations, but I don't think it's feasible to do a 2-story cafe. Was it? Yeah.
In front of this area? Seriously, do that need to be allowed or prohibited?
Let's put a pool in. I mean, I don't.
If people jump in there, then
It's a public.
there should be a lifeguard.
It's a public harbor, so if people want to take a swim, they're more than welcome to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that now.
But
Yeah.
is there a beach there?
Not there wouldn't be anything more than what's there now.
Laird, I wouldn't call it a beach. It's more of, it's enough for somebody to put their kayak or their outrigger in and get out on the water. It's also not like a great place to swim because of the current. And so I don't think we're going to have a lot of that here. I think that's the other difference from the North Star Beach. You know, that's like kind of like a mother's beach, and it's very safe. And I don't think you're going to get that here. This is my feeling. That's how it operates now.
I think instead of a beach, I'd see more of a launch ramp. Yeah. That's what it seems to be now. But good question. More worried about bridge jumping than I am people swimming. All right. Anything else on the committee's end? Everyone feels heard and we're good. I think this is good. I think we got a nice hybrid between both. Okay.
So, Mayor, you're looking for a revised plan with the pads as far as the committee members' comments, and then return back for a follow-up committee meeting?
Yeah, I'm assuming early part of January or mid-January, next year at some point, obviously. But that gives you guys a month and a half to put some ideas together.
Sure.
And then if anyone on the committee has ideas or we didn't think about something, certainly send them over and we can have that discussion in the meantime. If you haven't walked that site in a long time, I'd highly recommend you go do that. It's actually a massive site and a lot of opportunities there. So, and I think on the weekends, very well activated too. Okay, any public comments on this proposal? Mr. Mosier.
Thank you, Mayor Stapleton. First, I would observe, I think the reason the committee exists is because everyone is tired of looking at the gravel construction staging area that's been there for the last couple of decades. So I think the idea of retaining the CalRec trailers in their little gravel enclosure really detracts from this effort to beautify the area, and I don't think that should be part of any conceptual plan to keep that. That should be part of the effort to beautify the area, not retain something that's going to continue to look like a construction staging area. Secondly, in the Burnham Ward proposal, they were asking the city to completely replace and increase the height by 3 feet of the existing seawall and have the city, of course, us pay for that. I notice on this plan, note number 5 points to the seawall. It just says existing concrete seawall, so I'm not clear what the city's plan is for what needs to be done to the seawall and how expensive that will be. As to the trail going up from Lower Castaways to Upper Castaways, as Public Director Webb said, there may be some entitlement problems with that. The problem is not so much that the Coastal Commission might be opposed to it, but we ourselves in our local coastal program have a policy 4.4.3-8, which allows public works on bluff faces, but it says that we would only do that if there was no feasible alternative. And since there is a public sidewalk and a staircase that goes up to Upper Castaways, they may approve it, I don't know, but it's a little hard to say that there's no feasible alternative to get from Lower Castaways to Upper Castaways when we already have a pathway. And then I think a coffee shop would help to activate the area. I'm not so sure that there's any need for a 3,500-foot restaurant. And then finally, the lighting issue, I would just note, anybody who goes by there in the evening will know the neighbors on the opposite side of Dover Drive. Some of them like lighting up their houses if it was Las Vegas, so they're not apparently, at least some of them, very light sensitive. But that doesn't necessarily affect how we would make the park. Thank you.
Good point. So let's light it up like Vegas. To his point, I guess the committee, do we want to continue to, for $4,000 a month, it seems like a lot of space that we could open up to something else. Are we married to that?
Dave and I were just talking that we think we'll need the area for parking with these concepts.
35, yeah.
So it might not work into the next concept. And there's also an easement underneath there for sort of major water lines. So you can only build certain things over that. So that's what we have to work through on the next concept. But we definitely know anecdotally we're going to need more parking with these items.
So I agree with Mr. Mosher. I'd hate to pull in this parking lot and see trailer parks and gravel still. So I think unless anyone's against it, I think we should probably think about moving that out. Okay. I'm not going to repeat that. And then there was, Mr. Mosher had another point I had questions on, but I don't remember.
2 of them are just jokes.
Oh, yeah. Light it up like Vegas. Okay. Anyway, they're good comments, and I think let's look at that in the rendering. Oh, seawall. That was the question. Yeah. So obviously, if we have, thank you, Commissioner Kirby. What's that?
We'll have requirements on that seawall that are beyond our choice.
Yeah, we'll have to look at it. I mean,
Yeah.
It's
What's the FEMA requirement right now, Dave?
I don't know a lot about it's been there a long time, but it's I don't know if it's a requirement, but it's surely holding up that area. If you do it, it's going to change the park profile. Question is, we have a property line. You can see a little dash line. The seawall is actually, I think, in the city property, not in the actual marine area. So we have ability to work with that.
That's
But
good.
we'll have to look at the structural capacity of that.
Yeah, maybe your team can go look at it and make sure it's, if we have to remove a seawall and that's a big expense too.
Yeah, it's a big amount of money.
Yeah. Okay. Duly noted. Thank you, Jim. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Heidi Hall. I've been in the city for 62 years. I've driven by that forever and ever and ever. I have several issues. I'm not sure how many parking spaces this plan holds, but the story that you want to keep is still alive and working there. It's the people that are using it. They're putting their boats in the water. I think it might be the last place we have that they can do that, except for the aquatic center, but I think you have to rent theirs to be able to use that. So I would never want to have this taken away. And I think that would be its optimal and its first use, with any commercial being secondary. But I have a feeling that if you're going to put a 3,500 square foot restaurant in there, you've taken a lot of the parking spaces away from the people that were going to use them and have been using them. I certainly would want to see more parking in there for that. You did have the Back Bay Cafe that didn't really last very long, I think. I'm not sure if it's still going. We stopped going a couple years ago. But some of the restaurants you talked about in parks, their parking is a lot bigger than this. If you're talking about the one in Cornamore Park, it's got that whole big park. The one at Huntington Beach has a whole big park. Marina Park has a lot more parking spaces than this does. I would just not want to see the park essence of this be taken over because they want parking for a restaurant instead of for what we want it, what you want it for is the historicity that's still alive and well and working there very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the launch ramp is a huge, connecting the bay to the harbor is a huge portion. Agreed.
I actually agree with that point entirely, and which is why I think when you look at restaurants in general, they tend to be at hours that are not utilized by parks, especially if you're looking to more of a lunch dinner concept. I try not to go to the park at night with my daughter. It's a lot harder to see her fall.
Yeah, and hopefully, I think from my experience when I'm looking at NAC or North Beach, it's a lot of morning use when it comes to paddling and canoeing. So, but great comment.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Kathy Temple, and I grew up on Balboa Island. She could be my sister. I've been a resident here since '61. I'm so glad that something will be done with this area. I would prefer myself to see it not become commercialized. A small coffee area would be great, but to have another restaurant where people are clamoring to get there because they want to be right on the water, I think would bring in too many cars and become sort of too commercialized. So I just would like to voice minimizing that aspect of it, minimizing the auto traffic from that, and maximizing the use of the space, which is why I'm still here, is the use of the water. And I appreciate you all hearing this and talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
thanks again. And we've talked about parking quite a bit already. Thank you for that. You also noted this historical nature of the site for the initial landing in Newport Beach. So certainly water access has been a key part of the history here to the idea of enhancing water access versus taking away and limiting it or making it less attractive than it, quite frankly, it is now. It's one of the easiest spots in the city. Before COVID, it was somewhat of a secret spot, but social media got out and it became quite popular since then. And just for some clarification about the beach, it's not a swimming beach, no, but it's anything but above medium-high tide. You can actually walk from this location to Polaris Street and Morning Star and Evening Star, even down to the North Star Beach, on the beach. Just walk around. So it's about a third of a mile, maybe. It's soft sand and muddy sand, but it is utilized for that as well. So there's also a parking lot at the other end of that. I'm not sure what the name of it is. Had a name back in the day for it, which won't say in public, but it's above the North Star Beach as well. There's the
Westcliff Park.
Is it Westcliff Park? Thank you.
Yeah, Westcliff Park.
There's a parking spot there as well. Well, that in a sense, you talk about connectivity. These things exist, and there is a beach that is there. That's not a swing beach, but it is a beach that is utilized and accessed for activities. Thanks.
Another hidden gem in the city of Newport.
Hi, Wade Womack again. Thank you for the opportunity. I sure like this a lot more than the full commercialization of the location. Maximizing public access is really key. It seems like the current RFP process is totally broken, where it goes out as a vague bid, there's one bidder, so no one else wants to guess, because it's just kind of an unfair process. So now we're talking about it. It sounds like you guys want to do a hybrid, like Commissioner Zverchek mentioned. How about the city drills down, comes up with some drawings, and then put it out for a real bid where we get real good competition and the bidders, the vendors know what they're bidding on and they can sharpen their pencil, and we, the taxpayer here, could save a lot of money because we'll have a lot of competition for the bid itself. And the city could also retain control of the location and do like what they do down at Corona Del Mar and just rent out the concession. Seems to me the little coffee shop idea sounds neat to keep it activated and that kind of thing without a huge impact on the location. And so let's build that thing and let someone rent it out, and there's some money. Our city generally does pretty well. We have all this revenue coming in from all these developments that they're all going to be allocating towards parks. So, and we all pay a lot of property taxes. So I think the city's doing pretty well. I think we could throw down the 20 million, rent out, control this location so that we, the citizens, control this. We, the citizens, control this location, not handing it off for a 25, 50-year lease to the one bidder. It all just seems broken. So at the very least, I would hope and pray that you would instruct staff to focus down on a more narrow drawing based on discussions here, put it out for a bid as far as an operator goes. I mean, put it out for a bid for one vendor to build it out for us for $16 million, and then put out another bid, hey, who wants to operate the coffee shop? And then we control it, we the people control it, and rather than a private operator controlling it. And I'm kind of confused because you mentioned an architect here, but is that a city architect or the one proposer's architect who has not been awarded the contract? And would that give the bidder an unfair advantage?
Contract with the city.
I'm sorry?
It's a contract with the city, not with the bidder.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. But anyway, I hope we can hang on to this for the citizens, for generations. It's an epic location, as a historic location. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. That would be interesting too if we looked at if the restaurant was going to be for lunch and dinner only. That would allow the more hand launch when they're busier in the morning. That would help alleviate. I think that would be interesting. Okay, any other comments on this?
Just one last thing. I'm sorry, 10 seconds. If we could do racks for the public to put their paddle boards, with one back row, put hundreds of racks that would people ride their e-bikes down there, grab their paddleboard, and it would actually reduce vehicle traffic going in there. And it would be low-cost access for people that live around here. It would be awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and we've got some good harbor commissioners here that have always looked for ways to connect the harbor, and this could be a great idea to see if we can do some kind of storage thing there for residents or visitors, whatever. Okay, I think we got it. Any other public comments? Okay, did you guys have your marching orders?
We do. Thank you.
Okay, good. Let's try to come back, I would say, mid-January, so we can get a date on the books soon with the committee so we can all plan ahead of time. I think 3 o'clock in this room is always a good idea. So what is today, Wednesday? Thursday? Yeah, so we'll look for a Thursday in January, maybe at 3 o'clock, and go from there. Okay. Any other committee announcements or matters which you guys would like to see placed on future agenda items? Any announcements? Okay, good. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.